Good afternoon. My name is Jaime Granados. I am the Division Chief for Trade and Investment of the Inter-American Development Bank here in Washington, D.C. Thank you to the organization for inviting me to address this interesting audience. I'm going to speak about the issue of structure and functions of investment promotion agencies in Latin America and around the world. I have a presentation here that I will share with you. Here is, and I am ready now to address this very timely issue, something which is of a lot of interest, not only in Haiti, but in many other countries in Latin America and in the Caribbean. And that is exactly how the investment promotion agencies are structured, what are the main functions, and what are some good practices in order to promote the efficiency and the effectiveness of this kind of agencies in Latin America and around the world. This is the result of years of research and empirical observation and operational work that we have been doing throughout Latin America and the Caribbean during the last years. The issues that we are going to address are the following. First of all, a kind of a conceptualization of the investment promotion agencies and the benefits of foreign direct investment for the recipient countries. Second, the organizational structures of this kind of agencies or departments or organizations. And third, issues related to effectiveness, what we have learned of the issues that make IPAs truly effective in today's world. So let's go from there. First, we're going to address issues related to the conceptualization and to the definition of the kind of functions that IPAs perform worldwide. The first one is related to the definition, concept. The IPAs are essentially organizations devoted to promote, that is, to attract and facilitate investments throughout the world, and they do it via specific assistance services which are highly professionalized. And the way that I see them is the correct mix between the art of marketing and the science of data, and it's geared essentially towards foreign companies. The benefits, of course, can also generate advantages for local investors to invest in a given country, because many of these services are also provided for locals. However, the strategic objective of the programs usually is to gear to foreign companies, and therefore there are issues related to language, related of sensibilities to multinational companies, etc., which are not the same problem than the local problems. So we have to take into account very carefully who is the audience, and we have to accommodate the programs related to promotion to those specific audiences, that is, foreign companies, essentially. All right, once said that, what we have observed throughout the world is that there are 5 main categories of IPA functions, and they have to do with country branding, that is, promoting a positive acknowledgement or branding of the country throughout the world, and that is via marketing campaigns, via country seals and country campaigns. There are mostly a marketing device, but it is very important because very often there is a distorted view of the situation, the reality in a given country, and these country branding strategies help to promote a different perspective as to what's going on in a given country. We have seen that many of these programs, and we have promoted and we have financed some of these programs, are effective when they are well designed, which is a technical issue. Second, issues related to the core of investment promotion, and it has to do with the marketing campaigns, with lead generation, with the preparation of a country proposal or a value proposition. And that, again, is a very technical aspect because it has to do with crafting the information so well that it becomes interesting to the foreign investor who is looking for a country to establish a new operation. The third aspect is investment facilitation. This is very timely because right now, in the context of the multilateral trading system, the WTO, even though it is not a formal WTO campaign, they are negotiating an agreement on investment facilitation, and it has to do with how to make easier for the investor to come to invest to a given country. Some of the examples are, for instance, websites to provide information, or the establishment of a digital single window for investment, red carpet services, etc., etc. The fourth is investment retention and or aftercare, which is essentially dealing with local companies and convincing them that it's in their best interest to reinvest in the country where they are established. It is very important dimension of all this work because we know that between 60 to 70% of foreign direct investment are exactly this kind of aftercare investment. The other 30, 40% is essentially greenfield, fresher, new resources coming from abroad. But the 60, 70% is the reinvestment of the resources in the same country. Instead of repatriating, instead of sending away the gains, they reinvest those gains in the country where they are established, a very important dimension. And the fifth is policy advocacy. That is the role of promoting the kind of regulatory or environmental, contextual adjustments and improvements in the local environment climate or business climate in order to improve the ability of multinational companies to establish themselves in that country. So very often an IPA has, under this policy advocacy, they promote, they sensitize, they lobby for adjustments into laws, into policies, etc., so as to improve the competitive position of a given country and make it more interesting, more attractive to foreign direct investors. So we have found that these are the main functions, and we advise that in order to be effective, it would be very important to focus on these functions as opposed to, engaging in many other functions. For instance, broader issues of national competitiveness are not part of the most important IPA functions. Issues of quality systems are not part of an IPA function. It is essential to focus on these kind of issues for the IPA to become truly effective. Now, part of the context that we want to explain, it's absolutely essential to understand that it is very valuable to attract and promote FDI, and we have the evidence to prove it. We know that FDI facilitates the access to knowledge, to know-how, to technology from foreign resources, from foreign sources. So this is a very important dimension because when we are able to measure this impact with quantitative evidence, we have seen that this is perhaps one of the most important gains that a country has by attracting FDI, not only promoting jobs, which is perhaps for Latin American and Caribbean countries, the most important, the most salient aspect of attracting FDI, but also generating new knowledge, new know-how, new technology is absolutely essential. Second, it is important to know that FDI promotes economic growth and increased local well-being via precisely job generation, technology transfer, etc. And we know also with very strong evidence that for every dollar that a country spends in FDI promotion, we have been able to identify that in general, 56 new dollars are generated in additional FDI. So it is very effective to engage on FDI promotion activities. And then also very important the fact that for every $10,000 an IPA invests on promotion, we have found that those resources are associated to the generation of new 5.5 jobs. So it is important because FDI generates not only additional, FDI promotion generates new FDI jobs, economic growth, and access to fresh knowledge. It is also very important to understand that throughout the last 25 years and even more than that, we have seen a dramatical increase in the number of countries that have IPAs. So this goes to demonstrate that IPAs are a very good practice, that they are cost effective, that they are provide a lot of value for the money that is spent, and that's why countries are investing importantly on this kind of agencies. Now, let's focus on who the investment promotion agencies are. How are they structured? What are the legal organizational structures? How do they do it? How are they organized, etc.? But first of all, let me introduce you very quickly a couple of very interesting publications that we have released over the course of the last few years, because it provides very, very solid global evidence on the effectiveness of investment promotion, not only for Latin America and the Caribbean, but also for many other countries. I advise you to go to our website, and even by simply Googling these two titles, you will be able to find these two documents in English and in Spanish for your perusal, for your study, for your analysis, where you will find most of the information that I am about to share with you. And that's what has positioned the IDB as a leading agency in the study, in the promotion, in the financing of this kind of operations related to the structuring of FDI and agencies, of IPA agencies. Some of the best practices that we have been able to identify in this realm are the following. The first one is that a country needs a very strong investment policy framework. That is, it has to be very clear what kind of investments you are willing to attract, under what terms, under which institutional architecture, etc. Those issues must be very clear, because if there is doubts, if there is, for instance, duplicity, if there is dispersion of functions, if there's no clarity as to what sectors are attracted, in what terms precisely, etc., whether the country is interested in bilateral investment treaties or investment treaties or chapters within other free trade area agreements negotiated with other trading partners, etc., that information is absolutely essential. So it is very clear that, first of all, a country must have a strong, robust investment policy framework. Second, the institutional mandate has to be clear as to who is the agency that is tasked, that is mandated and instructed to attract investment. It has to be clear, and you have to avoid dispersion. We have found in many, many other countries that some agencies are not clear as to what are they able to do. Some countries have several agencies, and that is a message that should not be sent to the investor. The investor should be aware of the fact that there's only one agency, that it has the ability to deal with foreign investment promotion, and the clearer and the more straightforward these institutional arrangements are, the better perception the investor will have on the situation in a given country. So this is one good practice that we need to take into account. The third good practice is that we have to limit the exposure of the IPA to political cycles. The IPA should be strong and should not be affected severely by political cycles. The fact that a government comes and everything changes, all the people, all the specialists, the CEO, etc., to the extent that we avoid those disruptions, the IPA should be able to work more effectively. The fourth is that the IPA needs a very, very solid executive capacity, which will enable it to do the programming, to do the execution of the programs, and to procure goods, services, and personnel in a flexible executive way. If we have to rely on standard governmental procedures, which are usually very, very slow, then we will have a problem. We will deal with this in a few more minutes because this is a very important aspect of the effectiveness of IPAs. Of course, resources, the resources to complete and to fulfill the tasks and the job need to be sufficient and need to be stable. If they are not sufficient or if they are unstable, the IPA is not able to fulfill its main task over the course of several years in a row, which is essential for a successful program on FDI promotion. Another point is the institutional capacity. I mentioned a few minutes ago, the key here of an IPA is to have a successful matching between what we call the art of good marketing and the science of solid data. So you need talent and you need information systems. You need access to databases. You need a good, interesting infrastructure, a good locale where you can bring the investors and it is interesting, attractive, etc. It will give a good impression to investors. And the investor knows who they are dealing with. He or she understands whether the person they are interacting with is a professional, is well trained on the issues at stake, on the sector, on the product, or on the service that the investor wants to come to explode or to establish itself on in a given country. So professionalism of the persons, of the people that work in the IPA, good informational systems and access to databases, a good and interesting, well-looking locale when you can bring the investors, it's also very important. Another key aspect of the best practices is to maintain a very good relationship with the private sector. The private sector in every country is fully aware of the problems that a foreign investor will face if it comes to establish itself in a given country. So it is very important to listen to what the private sector has to say, not only other investors already established, but local investors also, because they are the ones that will tell you we have problems with customs, we have problems with immigration, we have problems with stability, with the contracts enforcement, etc. And you should be able as an IPA to listen to those advice and to do policy advocacy in order to improve the situation in a given country. And finally, we already know, and we know something that is very obvious, that you need to start from the beginning and you need to start growing organically. That is, there is a progressive evolution on the functions that you can undertake. You cannot become a fully mature IPA within the course of 1 or 2 or 3 years. Sometimes you need 20 years in order to become a fully mature institution. But you have to start from the bottom and you have to learn what are the basic issues that an IPA needs to engage with at the beginning. There's a slide on that within a few minutes. So some of the good practices here is that the operation of the IPA needs to be fully aligned with the national investment policy, as we mentioned a few minutes ago. And that is, the conditions for access for FDI need to be clear so that the IPA knows which sectors they can promote and in which sectors, for instance, there is a good environment in a given country to engage on, for instance, private-public partnerships. So the clearer the investment policy is in a given country, the more effective the work of an IPA will be. Now, another key important issue is that there has to be a differentiation between who sets the policy on investment and who does the investment promotion. The advice is to have them separately because policy setting is part of the central government and investment promotion is usually the subject of work of a different institution which is very executive. It has different and very professional role, very different from policy setting, and that needs this particular ability to execute mandates very, very quickly. And so this separation, particularly in our countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, it is particularly essential, and we will go into the heart of the matter within a few minutes. Shall it be attached to a ministry to which we will have a look at that? Usually it has to be attached to the Minister of the Economy or Trade or Investment or Industry, which is very attuned with the situation of the business climate in a given country. Is autonomy important? Autonomy from what? This is very important in those countries where the capacity of the central government in terms of flexibility, in terms of adaptation, in terms of procurement, agility is issue. If a country in the central government is able to flexibilize quickly, to adapt quickly, to procure goods and services quickly, then autonomy is not an option or not an issue. But in many countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, in fact, in all of them, where central government is always very rigid, you need to have a special arrangement for the IPA so that it can move quickly. The composition of the board of directors is very important, and the role of the private sector is absolutely essential. We will see that within a few minutes, just as we will see at issues related to institutional capacity and the evolution of some of the main functions that an IPA undertakes. It is very important, and from a comparative point of view, we have already identified what is the percentage of participation of IPAs with different legal structures, not only in Latin America and the Caribbean, but in the other OECD countries. And this is the information. In most of the countries, there is an autonomous public agency. In second place, there's a governmental ministerial unit or department. And there's also a mix of public-private agency and other approaches to engage in this kind of legal structures. So we will have to be fully aware. However, let me tell you something. The fact that there are autonomous public agencies or governmental, in general, this does not indicate that they are effective. They just indicate something objectively. That's what they are. Whether they work well, that's a different matter. And we will look into that in a few minutes. By the type of entity, if we look at the reporting schemes, we will see that most of the IPAs report to ministers, but many of them report to the board of directors, others straight to the head of state, for instance, in Korea, and in fourth place to other entities. And in Latin America, we have gathered data, and we know that the ministries to which they report are the following. Most of them, 72%, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, report to the trade, to the industry, or to the investment ministers. 14% to foreign affairs, and 14% to other ministries. So it is an overwhelming majority of reporting schemes, in terms of reporting to the trade, industry, and investment ministries. Important also is to mention that about 80% of IPAs have board of directors, and the composition varies. Generally, there is a chairman plus other representatives of public and private sectors. Again, because not only there's a lot of public policy involved in terms of, policy advocacy, for instance, but it is important to listen to the private sector. And when you have it within the board of directors, it is very important for the IPA to listen to what they have to say in terms of investment promotion. 63% of the composition corresponds to private sector in Latin America and the Caribbean, and some of the functions of the boards of directors are, of course, strategic in nature: to appoint the CEO, to approve the institutional strategy, to set the objectives, to monitor, not on a monthly basis, probably on a semestral basis or a quarter basis, how the IPA is doing exactly. The idea is not to allow the board of directors to micromanage, but instead it has to macromanage the activities of the IPA. The IDB, we generated this analysis, which essentially tells us that whereas you have institutional autonomy, there's a correlation with the effectiveness of public administrations. Where you have a very effective public administration, and that is very effective because it's very quick. It is quick in terms of setting agendas, in procuring goods and services, on getting things done. In those contexts, you don't need autonomy because it is so clear that you can engage in those kinds of activities that autonomy is not an issue. But this is proper of very strong governments with very strong public administrations, which is not the characteristic in Latin America and the Caribbean. So when you have problems of effectiveness in public administration, then autonomy of the IPA becomes important because you really need the IPA to become autonomous, to become relatively detached of the rigid public administration systems, because you need the IPA to be very executive, very flexible, very quick in engaging in the kind of specific activities that an IPA does. So this is an issue. We have found by the fact that we developed this governmental effectiveness index, that in many countries where you have a strong effectiveness, then you don't need to have an autonomous agency. But where you have rigid public administrations, you need an autonomous agency. This is what essentially this information wants to tell you. And therefore, in Latin America and the Caribbean, the institutional autonomy of IPAs is a very, very important issue. In order to start wrapping up some of these issues, let me tell you that, again, the evolution of the IPA roles is more or less the following. I mean, the IPA is not born mature. It has to grow organically. Even those very competitive IPAs in Latin America, such as Chile, such as Costa Rica, such as, in some cases, Brazil, of course, Uruguay, they didn't grow up mature. They were not adults when they were born. They were little kids, babies that need to start, giving baby steps, and eventually they became very mature. But it has taken them, in many cases, 10, 20, 30 years to become what they are. When a country is fully devoted to FDI attraction, there has been very successful programs that in 4 or 5 years have been able to generate a very competitive IPA with the support of international organizations, etc. We have the case, for instance, of Pro Nicaragua, that within 5 years, starting in about 2008, they were able to generate a very competitive IPA with the support of donors such as the IDB, UNDP, etc. So we have good cases of small countries that have become very competitive in terms of attracting investment by setting up the institutionality well and being able to develop a promotion program very successfully within a few years and with limited resources. So it can be done. Basic aspects have to do with informational websites, basic marketing, basic data, identification of the multinational enterprises already established in a given country, basic pre-investment projects, and engaging in some investment fairs. That is the minimum that an IPA must engage when it's relatively young. Then you are going to improve the quality of the website. You're going to have more targeted marketing. You're going to engage in policy advocacy. You are going to be able to have a more robust analytical capacity to engage in basic quantitative work. You are going to provide red carpet services, including, for instance, improvements to the newcomers, to visa programs, to facilitation for the education of the children of the executives that are coming to a given country, etc., etc. Then you have to be able to provide aftercare, and you will have a basic customer relations management system, a CRM. So this is the intermediate stage. A more mature state where you have a limited investment single window, which is, you know, a very important digital instrument nowadays. You are able to engage in, you know, the quantitative analysis for lead generation with the support of informational and automated tools and systems. You will have a more advanced customer relations management system, and you will be engaging in the issue of sustainability. That is the ability to determine the sustainability not only of specific projects that you are promoting, but of the entire portfolio of projects that you have been supporting within a given year. And finally, of course, a capacity to engage in evaluation of the effectiveness of the agency. This is very serious. The more advanced an agency is, the more capacity it has for evaluation of the quality of the job that it's engaged on. And then the advanced phase of an IPA. By then, the IPA should be able to have a fully implemented investment single window, should be able to engage on lead generation using artificial intelligence, using digital tools such as web crawling, which is essentially the ability of the system to identify potential customers out there worldwide and engaging them to come and look at your website and turn your website in a way that it becomes attractive to the viewer in the language that the viewer speaks, and focus on the sectors that the viewer is interested, everything automatically, you know. So artificial intelligence, web crawling are some of the most important 4.1 tech nowadays, and the IPAs are fully engaged, particularly the more mature and advanced ones, to use this kind of tools and exploit the tremendous ability that those technologies provide to the functions of promoting FDI. So in a nutshell, those are perhaps the most important issues that an IPA needs to address. From the Trade and Investment Division of the Inter-American Development Bank, we are at your disposition to continue these discussions, to continue the strengthening, such as we are doing, of the local investment promotion agency in Haiti. And we are here exactly to provide those kind of services as we have been doing through the years, and as we have been doing also in the trade realm. So thank you very much for your attention.